All right, I think we are on air. Welcome everybody to our webinar with Theresa Whitlock-Wild. I'll introduce her in just a moment, and we are very pleased to have you on today to talk more about Matt's Place with us. And let me share my screen here as we usually do this, because we have a little deck that we want to walk the audience through. Of course, a personal introduction. I will do this as well as a brief overview of Modality very quickly, and then also Matt's Place, of course. Today, Theresa will explain what it takes to be a caregiver and a patient with ALS, and we are very grateful for having you here. We usually at these webinars have had a lot of ALS experts, researchers, as well as non-for-profit organizations that are caring about ALS from different perspectives, from the scientific perspective, but also from the doctoral development perspective. Today, we want to hear from Theresa about her experience with ALS, which is through her husband, Matt, who was diagnosed with ALS about 10 years ago, and her specific endeavors to provide assisted living as well as technology to improve the day-to-day experience for patients living with ALS and other neurodegenerative diseases as well. But without further talking about these things, because Theresa will do so in a moment, this is today's agenda. Quick introduction. Then Theresa will talk about Matt's Place Foundation specifically and her journey in this process. And we will, as usual, have a conversation, the two of us. We have a number of things that we want to cover here. And we are also encouraging the audience to post questions through the Q&A tool. And we will be able to address these questions as well. We will close at around 11:45 Pacific, and we'll keep it fluid. Again, I'm DSO David Suendermann-Oeft, the CEO and founder of Modality. Just want to give you a brief context of Modality once more, because some of the questions that we will talk about with Theresa will be about technology. Modality is a company that is focusing on clinical research predominantly. We care about ALS as one of our major foci, very much so. And the specific type of research we do is focused on assessment of disease, assessment of ALS specifically. So you know the ALS-FRS-R is one of the assessment rating scales that are being used to identify how strong the disease has progressed, which is usually done through interviews between patients and physicians. We have a virtual guide, Tina, who does these sorts of interviews, and she can tell from how patients speak and how they move their facial muscles and limb movements and other modalities, how they progress to disease and whether treatments are effective. This is done on people's own devices and can be delivered directly to participants' homes, which is one of the important pieces we will talk about today as well, how, for example, research can be accessible in situations like Matt's situation, where he lives in a rural area and cannot really move to a clinical center that often. We work usually with biotech companies and developers of medical devices in clinical research. We are also funded by the federal government. Anyone who is a sponsor of clinical trials is one of our customers. We have a significant pipeline. ALS is right at the top, together with Parkinson's disease here. And but now, without further ado, I want to introduce Theresa to you. She is the co-founder of Matt's Place Foundation. We will hear more about what exactly this is and how it addresses the needs of patients with ALS and other neurodegenerative diseases. She is a strong advocate for families and specifically caregivers of ALS, and we hear from her about this in a moment. Her career spans many years, actually, as a project manager and designer at the Washington State University in Spokane, which is right around the corner from you. And she has training specifically in project management and organizational leadership, as well as communications at local universities in Idaho, as well as in Washington. And now, without further ado, I want to hand over to Theresa to tell us more about the uncrushable spirit and how to empower ALS families with dignity and independence.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to be here with you and to share a little bit about my story. So if you flip to the next slide, I'll kind of get into that. For anybody that's listening that doesn't understand what ALS I like to kind of go into it just in layman's terms. I'm not a doctor. I always tell people I play one on TV, but I'm not one. But just to get an understanding of what ALS is, ALS affects motor neurons. And so the brain and spinal column send out signals through the motor neurons for movement and repair of muscles. And with ALS, that signal is what starts to die. And so then the muscle atrophies. Patients that are diagnosed with ALS generally will be affected. It'll affect their speech, their swallowing, breathing, talking, I just said that, sorry, moving, so arms, limbs, all of it. And so they become basically trapped inside their body. Many of them still have full cognitive abilities. And what happens is they have full sensation. It's not a spinal cord break. So when we talk about becoming paralyzed, many people might put that into that realm of spinal cord injury, but that is not what this is. And so if you can imagine just being incredibly weak and not being able to move, and that just progresses over time. Next slide. So one of the things I talk about is that there's 3 types. Now, this is what I've learned as being a caregiver, meeting with hundreds of families diagnosed with this disease. What I tell people is, you know, if I have 10 people in a room with ALS, all 10 of them are going to present differently within their body at different points. Some will have limb onset, and that could mean, in my husband's case, it was his pinkies where it started first. Some people might experience foot drop. Some people experience unable to swallow, take a deep breath, or even losing the ability to speak. So it can affect them beginning in different areas of the body, and it can progress at different rates. So I've met families that they're diagnosed and they go through the entire progression of the disease in less than a year. Very, very traumatic for the whole family. They're trying to get everything that they need to care for their loved ones, and it's just moving at such a pace they can't keep up. Then there's the averagers. So most people are diagnosed 2 to 5 years, and then they pass away. And when my husband was diagnosed, he was progressing very quickly in the beginning. And so they kind of gave us an estimate to expect 2 to 3 years. And now we're on year 10. So he is one of those slow progressors. He progressed very quick in the beginning and then plateaued. My husband is fully paralyzed. He still has a little bit of head movement. He's on full ventilation, which means he wears a BiPAP to be able to breathe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We take it off for him to have a few drinks of liquids, have a few bites here and there, but really he has to keep that on to be able to keep his regulation of his respiratory system. And then he is still able to speak as long as he has that ventilation. Without that, he just doesn't have enough ability to push air out to speak normally. So next slide. So when Matthew was diagnosed, he was 41 years old. We'd actually, everybody kind of seems shocked by this. We were only dating, we'd been dating a few months, and this big teddy bear of a guy all of a sudden at 41 years old gets diagnosed. What does this mean, right? He is a Marine. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps. And because of that, 2 out of 3 people diagnosed generally are veterans. And the VA's, you know, it's a service-connected disease. So within about a week of his diagnosis, we found out we were going to have resources and support and a lot of help along the way, remodeling our home, getting the vehicle, getting durable medical equipment. And so what a huge relief that was for us. And then our next question was, well, what about other families? So I very nonchalantly threw out this idea, well, we should start a nonprofit and build smart homes. And that's what we perked up. We were like, wow, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And so, we started as a lot of nonprofits do. We went to family and friends, we began the board, we started selling bracelets around town, those plastic bracelets that say Matt's Place or Uncrushable Spirit. Matthew coined the term uncrushable spirit really quickly into his diagnosis, and he has lived that motto, I mean, full-heartedly. As he's lost function, he has not lost his humor, his grace, his compassion. He's just a joy to be around, even though, he's lost so much agency and autonomy through this. So we started selling bracelets, and that picture there is the first ramp we ever installed for a woman who was told she needed about $100,000 to remodel her home to make her bathroom accessible and be able to get in and out safely. And she said, I don't want to spend that kind of money. I don't have that kind of money. So we installed a ramp into the backyard for her so she could just get in and out safely. And she passed about a year and a half after that. But what a wonderful woman, and just a good reminder that even small things can make a big difference in somebody's life, right? Next slide. So in 2017, we went to the North Idaho Building and Contractors Association, and we said we would like to build a home here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Matthew is a native of Coeur d'Alene. In fact, his family goes back multiple generations, so he's a local. And at that time, it was really, Coeur d'Alene was starting to kind of become discovered. The building was increasing. And we told our story that we wanted to build a home that had the ability for families to move in, and it was fully accessible for their needs. And then also adding technology into it to help, one, increase independence for the person living in there with the disease, but then to live in there for free, no mortgage, no rent. So the entire family can stay together. And they loved the story. We had so much support. We had well over 115 contractors, subcontractors, organizations, businesses all donate something. And so that home, we broke ground in April. We had the first resident family in there in October. She was able to live in that home for 2 years, no mortgage, no rent. So that offset some of her costs. She was able to go travel and see the Grand Canyon like she'd always wanted to do. Her grandkids had space and room upstairs, so they got to stay with grandma almost daily. And just really improved her quality of life of having family and support nearby and offset some of that financial burden that comes with this disease. So that was in 2017. And then if you flip to the next slide, we partnered with multiple people. This house here is Spokane, Washington, and it is a prototype. And I know looking at it, it might look like it's a boxcar design. We see that a lot now for tiny homes and different ways to build, but that is not what this is. This is a prototype using cross-laminated timber. Now, one of our board members, Andy Barrett, he is a community-minded entrepreneur and just an all-around amazing human. He came to us and suggested we consider different building methods. So if you switch to the next slide. What we did, and that's not a very good picture, I apologize, but you can see in this home, that is the kitchen and living room on the right picture. And on the left picture is an angle of the master bedroom suite. So what we've done is just similar to the first house. It's another 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath house. But using cross-laminated timber, just a quick history, CLT is becoming a lot more common in the United States. It's something that's used, pretty extensively in Europe, but over here, it's just starting to take off. And it's used more in mass timber is used more often in commercial, not as much in residential. But what we're doing here is a healthy forest should have roughly 150 to 200 trees per acre. And our forests have about 3,000 trees per acre. So imagine the energy, right, when the fire is going through there. It's even exacerbated by the unkept forest, if you will. So this is going into the forest and taking much smaller diameter type trees, thinning out the forest, but leaving the bigger ones to thrive, creating a healthier, more sustainable product. They plane them down into 2x4s and then they cross and glue them. So what you're seeing are absolute solid walls that are about 5 inches thick of wood, and then they lock together like Legos. And so what we did was the prototype was to see if we could increase the build time, decrease the amount of energy. So this home has solar as well. Wood is a natural insulator. Spokane, Washington experiences all 4 seasons. So the snow, the cold, the freezing temperatures, all the way up to 110-degree weather. So this helps insulate the home, but has a biophilic design. So you feel like you're kind of a part of nature. And even today, when you walk into that home, it feels like you're in a forest. It smells like you're in a forest. And you have that natural lighting kind of coming in. The space is very accessible, minus the kitchen. And we did that very strategically because families with ALS, once they get to a certain point, they do need a caregiver quite frequently. So we kept the kitchen not accessible in this design. But in the bathroom and bedroom, master bedroom, bathroom suite, it's a very open design. Zero transitions, there's no trip hazards. The ceilings are incredibly tall, so it gives you a bigger feel. And the gentleman that lives in there, he moved in 2023. Now, I know I mentioned it's a faster build, but this happened during COVID, and we hit every possible challenge you can imagine. COVID had supply chain issues. I think we waited 2 years to get a stove, and then some labor issues. I mean, it was definitely a labor of love. I'm so grateful for all the organizations that stuck with us on this one. So if you go to the next slide. This is Ryan. Ryan is the resident of the Matt's Place home. What makes this home so much more unique is the first house we had done some technology. This house we even did even more. Ryan lives very independently. He's had ALS for 14 years. He was diagnosed at 29 years old, limited family support, was living in a studio apartment. He didn't want to go to a nursing home, and he's on Medicaid. So his expenses versus his income are astronomical. We helped cover his rent while COVID was happening because his rents were increasing, but he was a natural fit for this home. When we moved him in, he is very similar to Matt in that he's on full ventilation, but he can still talk and eat a little bit, but he is fully paralyzed. So he drives his head or his wheelchair with his head. It's called head array, so he can move his head back and forth to hit the buttons that he needs to be able to drive it. If you look on his computer desk there, he has a variety of tools. He's got an eye gaze Tobii Dynavox. He's got a quad stick, which uses sip and puff control and chin movement. He's got voice commands, and he's got dashboards so he can monitor his security cameras. When the nurse arrives, he can open the gate for her, undeadbolt the front door, open the door. The blinds behind him are automated. The blinds behind me in the picture are also automated. He can control the lighting, the entertainment, the temperature. He can even control the temperature on his blanket right there. That's a heated blanket that he turns on and off for comfort. Yeah. So no mortgage, no rent. He's on Medicaid. Suddenly, he's got enough space that, in fact, he told us when he first moved in after the holidays, my husband emailed him and said, how were your holidays? He said this was the first time in 12 years he'd had family together during Thanksgiving. And the reason why is their homes weren't accessible either. And so he couldn't get there and they couldn't fit with him. And so, how many years of social isolation did he go through? And now suddenly he's got space for family and friends. He's got agency, he's got autonomy, and he has control over what's around him. Next slide. Or the next one. So the pictures aren't great in this, I apologize, but where we're going. So we purchased the lot right next to that prototype home, and our next design, which I'm really excited about, is a 9-apartment complex. And the idea behind this is the first floor would have 3 apartments designated to ALS families to honor our mission. Again, they stay in there rent-free, mortgage-free. We will be using CLT products that are manufactured and shipped on site and put together, similar to Legos. If you think of snapping these solid wall sections together, it'll have all the automation that's necessary for voice, eye gaze, and tablet control. The solar will reduce energy usage even more for families, lowering their energy costs. But what we're hoping to do is second and third floors, same concept of having the automation, same concept of the accessible living, right? The big master suites so the caregiver can transfer easily. The loved one can use their eyes, their voice, or a button or a switch of some sort to run their bidet, their water to wash their hands, things like that. Through the whole progressive disease, how can we give them more agency and autonomy and independence, right? Second and third floor, though, will be at reduced rents. Our goal is to prove to people that this can be financially sustainable. So as we build these, that income then manages the property long term. We can make these scalable. We can do small ADUs all the way up to massive apartment complexes. This is the design that we're going to start with. And if you go to the next picture, there might be, yeah, so you can kind of see on the left side there, that's the 2.0 prototype on the left and the aerial view of the top. And you can see that there's a beautiful courtyard in the middle. And so all the apartments will also face that courtyard. What we're hoping to do is open this up to people with similar challenges as ALS. So spinal cord injury, Parkinson's, SMA, cerebral palsy. And the reason why is most houses, the majority, if not all houses in our developments, our city planners, our apartments, our condos, our townhomes, they're not built to this level of need. There is a small percentage of apartments that are allocated to be ADA compliant, right? But that is minimal requirement and not enough for families with this level of challenges. And so we want to create community for people going through very similar challenges so that they don't feel so isolated. They don't feel like they're going through this alone, and they're not having to spend thousands of dollars to retrofit their home for their needs. And that's the reality of it. So if you go to the next slide, I always ask people, what would you do? ALS, every 90 minutes, somebody's diagnosed, and every 90 minutes, somebody passes away. But what if there's a tragic car accident and somebody is paralyzed and they're quadriplegic? What if they have a stroke? What if, right? The reality is that most people will be a caregiver or need a caregiver in their lifetime. And this is the list of things that's necessary just for ALS. An accessible ramp is thousands of dollars out of pocket. There's no insurance that covers that. Remodeling your bathroom so you can get into a shower still, if you can get to the toilet, commode, sink. A wheelchair accessible vehicle. Our vehicle was provided by the VA. Thankfully, our vehicle's $100,000 for him to be able to just get in and out of our home. All the durable medical equipment, even if you have insurance, you're still paying 20%. So a $4,000 to $5,000 lift, respiratory equipment, you're going to need 3 or 4 different types, a cough assist, a suction, nebulizer, a BiPAP. Once you start adding all of this in, your loved one, the caregiver, has to manage all that. They have to find the contractor and remodel. They have to figure out how to care for your needs. And as you lose function, that caregiver loses independence too. And so that's what I tried to bring to families' awareness and to organizations and to researchers and clinicians. Because if you don't see the full picture of what families are going through, then how can we actually offer them the resources that they need? Next slide. I just kind of threw this in there. We can bypass it, but it's just a lot of costs of what they cost. But when you start adding up how many households in the US suffer from progressive diseases, we're talking about millions of people, and our housing and our communities are not built for this. The expectation is that the family has to figure it out on their own. on top of figuring out how to care for somebody, on top of losing possible income to care for that loved one. So generally, and I can speak about ALS, I can't speak about Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, but I can say when somebody gets an ALS diagnosis, it's because they progressed to the point that that neurologist can recognize it. There's a series of tests to rule out everything that it's not. Once they get that diagnosis, they'll apply for Social Security disability insurance, which will decrease their income by 60%. Then they will get to a point where they can no longer be left alone. They are at risk. They have to have somebody nearby at all times to care for them. Then that person has to quit their job, the caregiver, to become the primary caregiver for this loved one. Right when they need access to funds is right when they don't have it and they need to remodel their home. They have to get all of this stuff. Then we haven't even talked about medication and we haven't even addressed research yet. So I like to bring awareness to the challenges that families are facing because it is insurmountable unless we all understand and can make strides to improve that. Next slide. So if this inspires any of you, please do reach out, share our story, learn about what we're doing and how we hope to scale these all over the United States, minimally, if not globally. Next. And next. And then I'm done. So thank you.
The unquestionable spirit, not only Matt's unquestionable spirit, but also predominantly yours, is what makes Matt's place a success. And it's incredibly impressive what you've accomplished. Of course, starting 10 years ago with your own home and your own experience and challenges, but then really understanding how that also affects so many other individuals with the same problems and scaling it up to now version 3 of this impressive facility that you created there. Thank you so much for providing specifically the perspective of the caregiver and also the realities of living with ALS, because that is something that is so important for individuals that do research, that develop treatments, develop solutions, develop technologies like the ones that you mentioned and showed actually on one of your pictures there. And so we are specifically grateful because you can provide us a perspective that many of us are not very exposed to in our day-to-day work in ALS. So let's dive into a few questions that I had and that basically bridges a little bit the gap between our world, the research world in ALS, and then the actual realities. So as I mentioned, many of the audience members may be also from the drug development perspective or academic researchers, non-for-profit organizations also. But what should those people that developing solutions, technologies for or medications for the people living with ALS be aware of these realities that you just explained? So, for example, in terms of accessibility to research or the things that really matter and when we do these things.
So I think I'll address the financial barrier. So I think it's something along the lines of 70% of ALS families have difficulty accessing research and getting involved with clinical trials and participating because they're still trying to figure out how to get a hospital bed and pay their mortgage and have food on the table. So when they're struggling with their basic needs, research is the furthest thing from their mind, right? And that's a large percentage of people with ALS. It's not that they don't want to. When my husband was diagnosed, he didn't qualify for research almost immediately because his forced vital capacity was already too low. He couldn't lay flat. And so our doctor said, if you want to participate, you want to give blood, tissue, stem cells, you have to travel. And we were like, oh, okay. So there was a huge barrier there. The reality is
just what you said initially. So also the fact that your husband had a relatively low force vital capacity, and that excluded him already from research programs. And then now, years later, he's still with us, and he has actually shown that his disease progression plateaued. And is it also your opinion that these sorts of research programs should be more inclusive to allow individuals like Matt to actually participate in these, even though some of these features may not be ideal for those programs?
Well, in the beginning, I would say, one, you're trying to learn the disease and how you're going to live with the disease and how you adapt to the challenges. But then once you get the tools necessary to do that, then you start looking at research saying, okay, how do I participate? Well, many families are just outside of the ability to travel. So how do you bring that to them? And also, remember, it's not just the person with the disease. You're also talking about the caregiver. The caregiver is the one who's getting woken up all night. The caregiver is the one who's feeding, eating, dressing, um, caring for the home, the bills, everything. And children, I had 3 small kids when this happened. So the burnout for caregivers is astronomical. And then you're asking them to take on even more. Simplify it, bring it into their home as fast as possible or as easy as possible.
Direct to participants. So the lower the number of in-clinic visits are required, the better, right? I saw, for example, you have all these technologies that make your home accessible, that you have self-agency, you can control the blinds and the lock. And so you want something to that effect, also for the research participation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to think about the mental health of both the patient and the caregiver and what their level of support is. And in my experiences, if I didn't have paid staff, paid caregivers, most families, and it's not a judgment, it's just the reality is people move on with their lives. They want to be of support, but they have their own lives. And so it becomes very isolating for those two people. The friends stop coming around. The families don't really, they're busy working their own lives. And so they get kind of left. And, an example would be the last 5 years, I've spent every weekend in the bedroom taking care of my husband. He's very comfortable in there. He doesn't want to travel. He doesn't want to leave the house. He's got everything he needs in that room. So I just kind of am there as an additional set of hands. If I didn't have a caregiver during the week and evenings, imagine what our quality of life would be even worse, right? And then, so asking me to get involved with research when I'm already burned out isn't going to happen. And then if I have to travel 50 to 100 miles to get to a hospital or a clinic to participate, no, especially as you're mid to late end of the disease. And so understanding the challenges that these families are going through and offsetting some of those burdens, making it less stressful for the caregiver, making it easier for them to be able to answer questions.
And maybe also coming actually to you rather than you having to travel to a remote place.
Exactly.
That would be the solution. We have Lynn Brielmeier, who is a person living with ALS, also provides some context here. He is talking about a custom AAC eye gaze computer that he has used, which is a relatively affordable device, Olama or Oyama. Do you know that sort of device?
I don't know that one, no.
That was, and I will provide this information to you separately as well. And also he also explained that yes, the specific van and specific car that you require as a person that is handicapped and living with ALS is of course an additional challenge. Specifically, what you said about moving around and potentially going also to, not only to get care, but if you really want to participate in research, that like moving is an important piece of the puzzle.
Well, there's an expectation that you're just going to understand it. And I think therapists and clinicians, they talk about it day in, day out. So when they're talking, they don't realize that the main person, this is the new for them. And so when I designed the Adaptive Technology Center, I had a variety of eye gaze devices. I had what an accessible bathroom, kitchen, living room would look like, and a bedroom. I had devices like the quad stick and glass house. Glass house is how my husband plays video games And it's a device that's so easy, I can use it. I can Bluetooth connect it. He can wear it, has different modes of modality. So it has bite switch, eye gaze, eye twitch, muscle twitch, buttons. And so I can connect it to a television, his cell phone, a tablet simultaneously through Bluetooth. That is easy for me. That's the technology we need. It has to be easy and quick.
This is really impressive. And when you told me about this for the first time, I was really wondering, are these technologies that were specifically developed for people with ALS or other similar diseases, or have you actually reused technologies that were out there more for the consumer use and made it work for your specific circumstances?
Well, I would say that there's a couple examples. Right. So when somebody's diagnosed with ALS, they're told really quickly to hurry up and voice bank and hurry up and get an eye gaze device and practice with that. Well, my husband has an eye gaze, but he doesn't need it yet. So we've used a variety of things in between. Most clinicians don't offer the step by step, could be due to financial reasons and insurance coverage, hassle, or just that the clinician wasn't made aware. Voice cloning versus voice banking, right? I learned about voice cloning and was so excited by the technology and honestly a little creeped out because it's really good. But allowing families that option and understanding, and most clinicians are like, oh, just voice bank. That could take hours, and the mental anguish that that patient's going through, learning, knowing that they're not going to be able to use their voice again. Voice cloning can take a matter of minutes, right?
Now, did you remember both of us attended the Target ALS conference in Boston, and Dan Doctorow was on stage on day one, and he's no longer able to speak himself sentences really, but then he used that voice technology that you mentioned and actually produced a very impressive very impressive talk with all the original features of his voice and
inflection and pausing,
everything so natural. So it's really worth it. The technology has really improved so much over the past years, and of course we see this artificial intelligence. What we do also with Modality, improve month to month in its quality. So and you seem to be you are an early adopter of many of these technologies. I believe you're one of the most advanced homes for people living with ALS.
Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm going to tell you a secret. Don't tell anybody. I hate technology. So if it doesn't work, if it's not easy to implement, easy to maintain, easy to troubleshoot, I'm going to throw my hands up. So if we can, I hate to say it like this, if we could dumb it down for me, then awesome. That means it's lessened my burden of being the caregiver. It's increased his independence and dignity, and he's able to function the way he wants to, do emails, watch what he wants to watch, play video games, engage with people. And I don't have to be right there the whole time, right? So that gives me a little bit of space, because really ALS, pals and cows, a person with ALS and the caregiver with ALS, they become one. And you know, that sounds romantic in some ways. But after years and years of not having the ability to just get up and walk out the door, the things that we take for granted, right? We have to give them a separation and ability to have that independence separately.
Yes, and what you said about technology, that you're actually not a technology person, which surprises me, by the way, because you have done so much in that space. And but to your point, we are always being told, as researchers, drug developers, you should have the patient in mind. Caregivers are not even mentioned that often in that conversation. Patient in mind, make sure that these technologies, whatever these programs we involve them in, are as friendly as possible to them and as much adjusted to their realities as possible. But I believe there's still a significant disconnect in many of the programs that I've seen in the past. So
I think we have to remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? we have to make sure people have their basic needs met first: housing, shelter, food, clothing, and that security there. And then we can add on to that. Technology is not going to be the forefront of people's minds. Maybe younger families, but older families, like if you ask a 70-year-old woman to care for her husband, and then by the way, will you also learn how to use a Tobii Dynavox and help him voice clone and get him in and out of a wheelchair and clean him up in and out and feed and all of those things, she's going to look at you like, I don't know what you mean. You want me to automate my home. I'm just trying to get through today. Right? So we have to get them the basic needs first and then build on that. Like I said, if you want people participating in research, if you want them engaging and giving feedback, they're not going to be able to if their emotional and their physical bandwidth is just too much. They're not going to. So that's why I stress housing and technology that gives that access, but the technology is really the last bit of it.
Aspect of it, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It needs to be, because it's just an add-on burden, and it needs to be so seamless and so
Right.
accessible that it's almost as if it's not there, or even entertaining or pleasant. So you mentioned a number of these technologies that help Matt, for example, enjoy his
Gaming.
for example, using gaming, video gaming, or accessibility to TV programs and other things, which allow him to enjoy himself also. And
Thank
if that
goodness,
is
because I don't play video games. I don't want to play for him. I want him to enjoy his time doing
he
that.
needs to be independent, and if one can provide tools, or even in the research context where it is not a burden, but also something that provides value and is
Mhm.
meaningful, perhaps entertaining even, that is something that that I think should be considered very,
Well,
very
and
closely.
and I know people that write music with their eyes. The words, the notes, the orchestra, like put it all together. I know people that write. I know people that are studying. We should not discredit a human's ability to create and produce just because they don't have a fully functioning body. So giving them the tools they need and then watch them be able to look at what they can do. But if they're still busy struggling to survive, they're not going to be able to get to that level. And that's what I want to supply, is get them their basic needs so that they can live purpose-filled lives.
Yes, and you mentioned also initially that intellectually they're fully there, right?
Mhm.
ALS, and so that's something which we need to be aware of every day. That there needs to be a support of their intellectual stimuli also, and that of course is very difficult when you can move only so slowly and you have such significant barriers. So what should technology companies, drug companies, or researchers do to be closer to the realities and closer to the needs of the patients they actually care about, but may not know too much about?
Well, I've been told in the past that it wasn't financially conducive for a lot of companies to take into consideration certain subjects or types of people in their situations. And I would say leading your company with empathy and compassion, and really being able to understand and think about, if this was you, what kind of life you would want to live. You will be limited. You will have to learn to adapt. How can you fill those needs and hear what that whole experience looks like for that entire family? This disease is increasing in prevalence, and people are younger and younger. And so, how can they live a full life no matter what that length of life timeline looks like, right? Quality over quantity. And so, if technology organizations, researchers, scientists, they have to be willing to understand the barriers that are being placed within there and then help them. Don't expect the family to overcome the barrier. It's your job to help them figure out how to get over that barrier.
Absolutely. And we're actually coming to a close for our today's webinar, but I want to, first of all, thank you, Theresa, for providing your very unique perspective. And I'm really impressed. We're all impressed at Modality, what you have accomplished and how you can juggle, the realities of being a caregiver and a mom and a wife and a professional, and doing it all and also care for the larger population of the ALS community and the caregiver community as well. I want to share just briefly again for the audience the QR code and really encourage you to get in touch with Theresa. It's a non-for-profit organization which is fully based on contributions of volunteers. And so if you want to support Matt's Place Foundation as a volunteer or financially or with other ideas and donations, please get in touch with Theresa or with us. We will provide you with contact details with her. Thank you so much, Theresa. It was a pleasure having you on the program. Today, you will be able to review this on YouTube. We both will share that webinar on our YouTube channels. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of this Friday, and we talk soon.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.